are PKF. PKF Kenya is a firm of accountants and business advisors. In Kenya, PKF has offices in Nairobi, in Mombasa, in Malindi, in Nakuru, and in Kisumu. We are probably the widest represented accounting and consulting firm. We employ in Kenya about 300 people, in fact 400 people now, and in the region 600 people. In the region we also have offices in Kampala, in Rwanda, and in Tanzania. And we are, together with the other firms, looking at presences in Sudan and Burundi so that we have a proper total coverage of the East African region. We have 23 partners and 550 staff in all the 9 offices. Our objective today is to share with you the firm's views and proposals and suggestions as concerns the 2013 budget. You know, 2013 budget now is the first that is a national and county government budget. We have shared these views with the Budget Committee of Parliament, and they form the basis of our conversation this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, may I invite Michael Mburugu to talk us through some of the points.
I will go straight into the issues that we think the government needs to consider very, seriously in terms of ensuring this economy is going to function over the next couple of years. And one of the things, there is a feeling that there is no prudent management of public resources. For example, if you go to any government office today, you will find what I would consider to be a junior officer in government allocated a car, a driver, a bodyguard, a copy typist, a secretary, and a PA. There's absolutely no need at this point, to have those kind of people in government offices. And therefore, we feel that for the government to manage its resources, which to a large extent, almost 60% of the government expenditure is going to paying public servants, there is need to rationalize and streamline the public service to make it lean and efficient, and therefore spend more of the money that the government has to development or related to capital projects, building of roads, dams, energy projects, and all that. So the alternative then, in terms of cutting on government expenditure, would be really to fast track the implementation of the private-public partnerships. This bill has been talked about the last couple of years, spearheaded by Vision 2030. But to date, I do not think that we have achieved a single project under the PPP Act. And therefore, there is need for the minister or really the cabinet secretary concerned to take the PPPs to the next level, to the level that everyone would expect it's functioning, because that is going to assist the government to also manage the sources of revenue. There's also a feeling that the government is likely to borrow to finance the 1.6 trillion budget. The Kenya revenue targets for the year just about to end. They will not meet their target by close to 120 billion shillings. So if you take, for example, the estimated correction by end of June to be about 900 billion, then you can see there is a shortfall of 700 billion shillings that will have to be financed by someone. And this is likely the easiest source of money for government, might be through internal borrowing or external borrowing. We do feel that if this happens, then you're going to deny the business community the funds to borrow from the banks, and this is going to push the interest rates high. So the government ought to sort of manage its resources in a very prudent way, even in as much as they would like to raise the 1.6 trillion shillings that was tabled through the budget estimates. There is expectation that there should not be too much borrowing. If there is any borrowing at all, it then should not be local borrowing from the banks through T-bonds and T-bills, right? I didn't mention the issue of allocating resources to really priority projects under Vision 2030. There is no focus, there is no emphasis really on Vision 2030 project. It appears like a domain that nobody is talking too much about at the moment. But we do feel that for the economy to continue picking up, those infrastructure projects under Vision 2030 will have to be funded sufficiently. The other issue is about the county governments and the drama that you have also witnessed the last couple of months. And obviously the Senate and the National Assembly have not set a good example. The case of the Division of Revenue Bill, which the President is supposed to be accenting to. There is really no spirit of mandate. There is no clear parameters within which the Parliament, the National Assembly and the Senate, are supposed to exercise their mandate. And therefore, this is the confusion that you are seeing with the Division of Revenue Bill, the pull and push between the Senate and the National Assembly. This again, you will see, it's scaling down to the counties. The county governments, 47 of them, they are asked to be a very prudent way of managing how they are going to raise finances, how they are going to spend the money. They need to comply with the public procurement laws and all that. Of course, the government has put in place enactment of legislation that is supposed to guide them on how to do it, the Public Finance Management Act and other acts which have come out of it. But it does appear that the county governments might be the weakest point in terms of managing public finances. For example, most of them don't have capacity to actually even absorb the budgets that they are getting, other than obviously buying nice residences and the cars. There is no clear policy at the county government, and there is no demonstration whatsoever by any one of them that they are likely to absorb the budgets and the monies they are being given in a prudent way. So then that needs to be managed carefully so that we don't end up with a situation where you have county governments operating more or less like the mayors, how they used to operate. Then, having talked about the government managing its resources and cutting on borrowing, how do we expect the government to raise money to survive? This has to be through taxes, and one of the things that they need to do is to grow the economy by opening up new markets. For example, many of you will think that our biggest trading partner is European countries or Far East countries. Far from the truth. In fact, our biggest export market today is Uganda. It's very clear from government statistics. Rwanda comes in, Tanzania as well. Then a bit of Europe because of floriculture and coffee. But the sub-Saharan countries are growing at the moment at a rate of 6.6%, when Europe is growing, or rather declining, at the moment estimated to grow at a rate of 1.4%. The US still in problems. So you don't expect that you are going to open up our export markets by targeting those countries. So Kenya has to focus on non-traditional trading partners, and especially sub-Saharan countries who are sort of like enjoying a huge boom in economic growth. There's a lot of excitement in terms of China investing in those countries to take advantage of the mineral resources. With many of sub-Saharan countries now striking oil, our focus should be in that direction to open up new markets. And then there are short-term tax-specific measures that the government needs to consider to survive in the meantime, and also to establish institutions that are going to last over time. One of the things we do feel is that the tax system in this country is actually colonial. It's outdated. It's too old. We are relying on an Income Tax Act of 1974, our value-added tax 1990. Some of you may not have been born then. You're relying on Customs and Excise Act of 1978. And recently, the East Africa Customs Management of 2005, but which has a limited application because it only deals with import duties. So we do feel that one of the things that the government needs to do now is to make every Kenyan be proud of paying taxes. But how do you achieve that? You can only achieve that when you have in place friendly tax legislation. You cannot have tax systems that themselves are working at cross purpose. So there is then need to sort of like overhaul all the tax legislation, Income Tax Act, the VAT Act, Customs Excise Act, and any other taxation act, in order to sort of like make it modern, efficient, make it simple for taxpayers to comply, and every person then will be convinced why they need to pay the taxes. So there is an urgent need to amend the tax statutes. Last year, the government attempted to introduce a new VAT law, which never worked because there was no public participation, and the bill itself is considered to be too aggressive in the essence that it seeks to tax farmers, it seeks to introduce taxes on medicine, on basic food products, and that's going to be counterproductive given the kind of, poverty you witness across the country. So there is need to involve the public and especially the business community in coming up with new tax legislation that is acceptable by all the people across board. Then the tax administrative structures that we have, and this in particular the Kenya Revenue Authority, over time the KRA has refused, either by design or by default, to change with times. Today, if you go to Uganda Revenue Authority, you actually transact all your business from either your iPhone, from your iPad, or from your desktop in the office. You file all your returns, you engage with the revenue officers online, very efficient system. And that is for all taxes, including customs. Reason why Kenya cannot do it to date, perhaps is a deliberate attempt to cover up for corruption. And we do feel that there is need that the Kenya Revenue Authority shape up in terms of making it efficient, use technology to administer tax, interact with the taxpayers, and this is the trend all over the world. So if they expect to continue the way they are doing, there is no way they are going to raise the revenues. That is why they're actually missing the targets, all right? One of the other things that deter people from engaging with the Revenue Authority, the world over, is if the tax dispute resolution mechanisms are not working. And one of the things that has happened in this country is out of the outdated acts, as I said, that we are using of 1974, 1978, 1990, if today you appeal to the local committees or to the VAT tribunal or to the customs tribunal, then what happens is if you lose a case as a taxpayer, you are required to pay all the taxes before you can appeal to the High Court. I will give you a case in point. A client is assessed 600 million shillings, which is fictitious sometimes, which is out of misinterpretation of the law. And for him to get justice, he is required to pay the taxes upfront. This actually flies against the spirit of the Constitution, because it is very clear that no law is going to be put in place that will impede any citizen from accessing justice. And that is the reason we are saying that the tax statutes need to be reviewed wholesome, not just the VAT Act, but all the tax statutes have to be reviewed to make them efficient and accommodate the taxpayers. And when you have an environment where the taxpayers and every citizen is feeling not ambushed by either the law or the KRA themselves, then people come forward and contribute to the national kitty through voluntary compliance with taxes, right? Then finally, we do feel that there is need, now that the government has a bloated budget, 1.6 trillion shillings, to immediately reintroduce capital gains tax. Capital gains tax was suspended in 1985. At the time, the reasons were to give the capital markets an opportunity to grow. But really, I do not think that there has been any really linkage between how our capital markets have grown and the suspension of capital gains. For example, there is absolutely no reason why a person living in Kibera shouldn't pay VAT on bread, which is really a basic necessity for him to survive. And for a rich person disposing of his house, plot, hotel, shares in a company, not to pay taxes. It doesn't make sense. In fact, the maxims of taxation require that the rich in society pay equitably more taxes than the poor. And there is absolutely no reason why then Kenya should be the only country in East Africa that does not tax wealth, because all the other countries in East Africa do have capital gains. And the world over, there is absolutely perhaps very few rich oil mining countries that do not have capital gains tax. And therefore, we feel that Kenya should actually reintroduce capital gains tax. And this is perhaps going to be the biggest source of revenue to meet the gap and to finance devolution, other than to borrow money from either internal sources or external sources. And finally, we would like to comment on an issue that is happening at the moment between the Senate and the National Assembly. We do feel that it's quite irresponsible for those two institutions to be fighting like children. Their mandate in the Constitution, in the Public Finance Management Act, is very clear. And absolutely, we would not expect to see the National Assembly and the Senate behave in the manner they are doing, because this has an impact on this economy. The Division of Revenue Bill has attracted a lot of opposition, and rightly so, because the Senate has got the mandate to actually input their views to the Division of Revenue Bill, but because parliaments want to be seen as the supreme body between the two, and because of their salary issue, they have been very responsible actually in sort of like trashing the input of the Senate to that bill. And we want to see what the president will do, because if he assents the bill as it is, then it even doesn't meet the constitutional requirement of a minimum of 15% of revenues that need to go to the county governments. And therefore that can easily be challenged also in court as unconstitutional. And therefore we do feel that it's a matter we cannot just let pass, and those people sitting in those two houses need to shape up. The reason for those disputes between Senate and the National Assembly could be emanating from the loopholes that are in the Constitution and the Public Finance Management Act and other acts that have been registered. And we do feel that it is time that now the Cabinet Secretary in charge of the Treasury ought to put his house in order. He is ultimately responsible for financing all the monies, whether for the judiciary, for Parliament, and the executive. And therefore, there is need to re-examine the various statutes that deal with management of public finances to make sure that if there's any sort of like overlap in law, that is expeditiously amended. And by the time we begin the next cycle of government budgeting, we don't have the drama that you're witnessing between the two bodies.
I should just like to say thank you very much for coming, and perhaps to start with a little theory about budgeting. Have you ever wondered what is the distinction, what's the difference between a plan and a budget? Because we have one cabinet secretary who handles planning and another one who deals with budgets. Well, they say that a plan is what we want to do, and a budget is the reason we can't. I just want to say, add some very quick remarks to what Michael has mentioned. And this is just to say that the top priorities for our country, I think we should say our country,